Welcome to this new analyst angle. I'm Christophe Bertrand, principal analyst here at theCUBE Research. Very excited today to be joined by Mark Ward, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Congruity360, and we're going to talk about some numbers. Mark, welcome. Tell us about what you do again, and tell us about Congruity360.
Thanks, Christophe. Good to see you again. Happy Father's Day to you and all the fathers out there belated. Yeah, Congruity360 is really the leader in what we refer to as unstructured data management. And I think the survey that we're going to review today is going to point out a bunch of the key elements that belong in this category called unstructured data management. Specifically classification, we'll talk about that. But really AI, GRC, and infrastructure optimization. So I think the work that theCUBE has done is going to give some really important information out to our potential prospects and clients.
Absolutely, and I think the market needs this information. So let me take you through some data, and I think we'll go back and forth, Mark, on this. There's plenty to cover. First of all, let me start by saying that this was research that came from our Cyber Resiliency Summit. So we conducted this summit, and thank you for sponsoring it, Mark, in the January timeframe, and out of it, we also conducted research. We looked at multiple facets of cyber resiliency and data management and surveyed 600 respondents around the world, North America, APAC, and EMEA. And what we found, and you're going to see this on our first chart, is the fact that there is a costly impact to cyber attacks. If we can just take a look at the chart for a second here, you can see the costly disruptions of cyber attacks. On the left-hand side is the people who told us when they were affected, meaning they were affected in a way that had a negative impact or operational impact. And as you can see, it's a lot of people. It's about 400 who were affected once or multiple times. And you can see that very easily on the left-hand side. Now, what we did after that is we wanted to understand what the impact was, because obviously there are a variety of possibilities. So this is, in a way, a popularity contest. And as you can see, operational disruption and financial loss are really the top two, but all of these impacts kind of come up almost in the same general level, whether you're talking about, again, financial impacts or data-related impacts, which is really what I want to drive this conversation in the next few minutes. Look at this, data exposure in the fourth position, the fact that there was data leaks, data exfiltration. All of these impacts are extremely concerning and clearly pervasive across the board. The other thing I want to show you is the fact that cyber resiliency, and by extension, anything you do around cyber resiliency to support those the objectives of cyber resiliency, whether it's backup recovery or data management, that includes data classification. It's not just technology. Of course, it's a technology priority, but it's also a business priority. As a matter of fact, what we can see is that it's a critical element for implementing AI solutions. It is also something that technology vendors have a pretty big role in promoting. So again, here, generally wanted to understand the level of agreement that all of these respondents, 600 of them, had with the various statements. As you can see, there's quite a bit here, but the net is this. Cyber resiliency, it's both a technology and a business imperative. It is a prerequisite to deploy AI solutions, and clearly it is a very transformative type of initiative that reaches far across the organization and into the data infrastructure as well. So Mark, getting back to you here, what are your thoughts on these first two charts?
Well, I think you nailed it, Christophe. Number one, if you look at what's happening in the marketplace, you see the traditional and newcomer data protection companies really looking at this type of data and building out solutions that I'll call it solve for these issues and concerns. So when you look at a Rubrik or Cohesity, a Veeam, Commvault, all of them are now looking at how do you appropriately classify information, not only to take cost out of the equation, but to take security risk out of the equation. And we use the term data security posture management. I think it's becoming somewhat ubiquitous in the backup world, but it's also very much becoming a must-have in the general purpose customer environment. And we see a lot of our clients consuming our solutions because of their requirement for better security, for better ability to identify what data needs to have what recoverability components to it. So data security posture management is big. You mentioned the other one that is starting to drive, I'll call it procurement process, and that's AI. Folks can't afford, based upon the cost of infrastructure, to throw all data at AI engines. They need to send what we refer to as smart data. And smart data is data that has only the information from the users, from the applications that are intended for that AI machine. It doesn't have copies. It doesn't have obsolete data. It doesn't have file formats and file types that are not relevant. It eliminates PII and PHI data so that there's not any AI governance or regulatory concerns. Smart data is a very important part of AI. We've seen our customers reduce infrastructure costs by over 80%. That's both on the GPU and the target AI storage side of the house by implementing our smart data approach.
Right. So actually, let's talk about data governance. I have a couple of interesting data points here I want to share. If we take a look at cyber resiliency and the relationship with data governance, you talked about obviously the fact that you need clean data and smart data for AI, but what's interesting here is that when you ask all of these respondents, IT professionals, decision makers, as well as cybersecurity professionals in our sample, 50% of each type, the most significant business drivers underlying their data governance programs are listed here. And again, it's a popularity contest, pick all that apply. And the first thing they say, of course, I want to improve my cyber resiliency effort. But the second one is what you mentioned, data security posture. So we can see here, in my opinion, as an analyst, this sort of merging of markets and trends, this conflation, in a sense, of markets where we're talking about security posture management in the same breath as we're talking about data management, because it's all intertwined. But more importantly, reducing business risk, complying with data privacy and protection laws, and again, we have it here with compliance regulations in the top 5. All of these are absolutely critical, and we keep seeing, again, the fundamental role of data governance here, not only for cyber resiliency, but also for securing the business and de-risking the business. We'll look back on the AI component in a second. Essentially, there are 4 types of categories that are important here in terms of what's driving data governance today in the context also of cyber resiliency. A number of cyber-related reasons, they are the top 2, but it's also about the business, about compliance, and about operational efficiency. And you mentioned operational efficiency a little bit earlier. I will just point out that a few years ago, from memory, I could say that optimizing cost or making better use of data assets would have been much higher on the list. So things have changed, and here we can really see the impact that cyber attacks have had on people's posture in general and investments. So data governance, absolutely critical. I think it is also at risk. This is another aspect I want to point out. We have some data here that shows that a vast majority of people, more than half of the sample, are concerned that they cannot maintain their data governance requirements because of cybersecurity incidents. So for those who were affected, as you can see, the permanent deletion of data for 46% of them, sensitive data exposure, temporary inability to access data, those are very big numbers. This is what happened after an incident here that affected their data governance. This is a problem because, as we just saw, compliance, regulations, etc., it comes at a cost. The cost of non-compliance, the cost of lost data, the cost of customer dissatisfaction, all of these come into play. So, Mark, let's turn back over to you.
Yeah.
What's your take? This is the heart of your business.
Absolutely. And I on one side of me, I wish I was just focused on kind of preparing everybody for an appropriate deployment of AI. But I would say 90% of our clients have had an event, and they are responding to that event with a big investment in data classification. That classification investment will derive for them the ability to identify and protect information in a fashion that is automated and is taking advantage of some of the infrastructure tools that the industry has given us, such as object storage, such as leveraging what we refer to as NetGap, which is the ability to secure information in an environment with network access and permissions changed so that a owner operator doesn't have access to information that he or she shouldn't. So we're leveraging a lot of the, I'll call it infrastructure technology improvements that have happened to help secure people's data, leveraging our classification at the core. And I think, as we talk about information and classification in particular, you mentioned kind of what's happening in the industry. I'll point to everybody to what happened a couple of weeks ago with Informatica and Salesforce. I mean, there's a reason why Salesforce is acquiring and Informatica. Data classification is a big piece of that equation, making sure that Salesforce and all of the products that Salesforce offers have access to the right data at the right time for the right use cases. Leveraging some of the structured data capabilities of Informatica, and they're very much focused on databases and large ERP type systems, but making sure that their infrastructure in the back end, you can only imagine how big Salesforce Cloud is. It's a big environment, and Informatica can help basically identify what part of the structured data landscape should be in what level or SLA of compute and storage and data protection, et cetera. So this movement to recognizing that cyber resiliency is the number one concern of the IT and the CISO, followed by this explosion of you can't delete data because that data may be very, very important for you in your AI workloads. So how do you decide what data goes where? How do you protect that information from the third-party folks that want to have access to it? And again, how do you do it economically in a feasible fashion? So we've got some great, I think, slides coming up to show folks where the industry is going and why, again, classification is a super important part of their strategies.
Well, so let's talk about data classification. I have some great charts here and some great data. First of all, 59% of organizations actually said that they currently leverage a data classification tool or process. Now that means that, a bunch of them are not, but at the same time, 37% told us they would be doing so in the next 12 to 24 months. So I think it really makes the point, Mark, here that you were mentioning, which is, well, data classification is essential. Clearly the market is in full swing. And by the way, the fact that people are doing it today doesn't mean that they've done it comprehensively, which is what my next point is. By the way, in the mid-market, we see slightly different perspectives. Fewer organizations actually are doing data classification, but everybody should be doing it. By the way, let's look at what this means in terms of tools. Big confusion today, in my opinion. As an analyst looking at this, asking people what they use from a data classification perspective as a technology, I think there are some tools here that may not be fit for purpose. There are multiple tools at play. I think it only adds to complexity potentially, but multiple types of tools are being used. Some of them may be more valid than others. So the message to you as a viewer is to rethink about what you're using today in your environment and whether you're using the best possible tool. I would argue that data protection, backup recovery type of solutions may not be the best way to do data classification. It's a very different and separate exercise in my opinion. Now, there are a bunch of options here. Again, the objective is multiple. It's being compliant, it's being ready for AI, it's also, more importantly, being cyber resilient throughout. So there are, again, necessarily no bad answers, but I think there are better answers than others, and it's very confusing right now. In time, I expect that we'll see a more unification around certain tools, but lots of tools are being used at the same time. This is also what this tells me. But here's the thing, though. If you think about how much of the data is actually indexed or classified, what you want to understand is metadata covered, or is everything covered at the content level, right? As you can see on the left-hand side, there is, first of all, the first thing that jumps at me is the numbers are not that high. in terms of the data being classified, which means a lot of data is not classified, and not everything is classified also at the content level, which you kind of need to do from a PI perspective. And then the approach is today to try to do both for the vast majority of organizations here. But I think some organizations are only looking at metadata. That may not be the best approach. And some organizations, very few, actually look into each file, meaning they analyze and classify the content. So again, if I'm thinking about the perspective of a compliance play or preparation for AI, you kind of want to know exactly everything about all of your data, classify everything so you can reuse it. So Mark, are these findings surprising? What's your take on maybe this complexity of technologies in the market, and clearly the fact that while everybody has said they're doing it and they have a project maybe coming up, there's still a lot of data to classify here that's not covered.
Yeah, absolutely, Christophe. And 3 years ago, when I first started getting involved in this classification journey, classification was synonymous with GRC. And now what you're seeing based upon the feedback from these clients is that classification is now synonymous with DSPM, with DLP, with security related and data protection related initiatives. And I think that's good, because I think the world is now seeing that the capabilities within a data classification platform are really applicable across a wide set of core IT pillars. The one that is interestingly not there is kind of the infrastructure optimization side of the equation. Again, with the advent of object storage and other low-cost cloud repositories, we're seeing more and more clients look at their existing production data landscapes and say, why do I have 10-year-old data sitting on that very high performance Dell or NetApp or Cumulo storage system? Let's move that to an appropriate place. Folks aren't deleting it, but they want to have it in a secure environment at a much lower cost. Infrastructure optimization, we're seeing, is kind of being the number 2 reason why folks are using data classification. The number 3 reason is AI. Again, the concept of a data lake, the concept of throwing away unstructured data is just not possible. That data can be and very valuable in an AI workload, but again, you need to understand, does it have PII? Does it have PHI? Is it in an appropriate, I'll call it storage environment, so that the cost points are there? And this is why data classification is not solved with a metadata-only approach. Metadata is a great opportunity for folks to get what we call insights into their data. Key metrics that show them things around rot or things around PII sensitivity. But you need to have that content view as well. And I constantly use the analogy of, how do you eat an elephant? And the reality is you have to do it one part at a time. So metadata is a good starting point, but if you don't follow up after using metadata to hone in on where the likely points of risk are or where the likely points of sensitive data are, you're missing the overall equation. And the last piece of that data classification journey, and you mentioned this, and kind of these 600 users mentioned it, is having a remediation workflow that is automated, that has complete chain of custody through the life cycle of the data, and is auditable in the case, and unfortunately, customers have these cases where they need to go and show folks, hey, I did protect the data in the following practice, and yet here's the result. So lots of different things going on. Data classification, in my mind, looking at what folks like at Microsoft are doing. I mentioned the Salesforce acquisition of Informatica for a structured solution. I think you're going to see an enormous amount of activity by the 800-pound gorillas in and around this data classification use case.
I could not agree more. Very clearly, lots going on, and actually, I want to talk about 2 things now. Unstructured data, because you just talked about structured. Let's talk about unstructured data, and I want to rebound on this ROT metric, ROT. We'll talk about that, and also remediation. So let's take a look at some interesting findings, again, from these respondents, 600 of them from around the world. We asked them specifically about their unstructured data, and wanted to understand whether they understood this metric called ROT, which is really about data redundancy, obsolescence, and what's trivial. So essentially, do you know what you have too much of, what is in excess, what you should get rid of because it's old, and what's really not that important. And it turns out that people actually have a pretty good sense in the SaaS environments, pretty good sense of the metrics. That makes a lot of sense because the service itself needs to be optimized. There are lots of tools in place, and there's a question of cost in the SaaS environment. But what is more surprising, or maybe not surprising, that's a definitely a discussion point, the fact that 55% only actually said they knew the metrics for their on-premises data. I would have expected that to be much higher. And then for cloud, look at that, cloud-hosted, non-SaaS, okay, data, definitely a lower number. This tells me that there is a lot of work to do from an operational efficiency standpoint, and the fact that people don't even know those basic metrics also goes back to the other issue we mentioned around compliance, cyber resiliency, et cetera. So classification comes in with many advantages, and certainly has a long way to go in this case. And then we talked about remediation for a second here. And then we wanted to understand, in the question we asked around data governance, whether they had a policy in place. A simple question: do you have a data governance policy in place? Everything has to start with that. Let's be clear. And what's interesting is that, as you can see, it's not the vast majority that do. 36% said that they have an automated detection policy. 31% only say they have automated remediation, which is really something you wanna have in place as well. And then the fact that 28% said that they have a policy, but there's only partial automation, is really interesting from the perspective of the fact that people are not quite ready. And let's break this down, Mark. I have a couple of questions for you because you see this every day. When I look at these numbers, it tells me that, okay, best intentions, people want to do stuff, they are starting to do it. At the same time, they're not leveraging, given the amount of data they have to deal with, they're not leveraging automation enough. The fact that it's only a small number that has automated remediation or detection tells me the exposure must be absolutely tremendous out there. Is that what you're seeing too?
Yeah, absolutely, Christophe. And I think, as you started off this presentation, the survey is a cyber resiliency survey. What we're seeing from our clients is that I'll call it the attacks presented through the cyber resiliency world are forcing customers to take a look at classification and then remediation in a whole different landscape. 3 years ago, just using kind of my entry point, when folks looked at what they were actually going to do from a policy administration, very few large corporations would take I'll call it the decision to change the SLA between the business and IT. And what I mean by that, I mean, hey, I'm going to pay extra just to have access to all of my information. Well, now IT and the CISO are saying that's not good enough, because the attack surface that we're representing with having all of your information available is just not sustainable. So we need to make the decisions now as to what information belongs in what level of data protection, what level of, I'll call it cost, and what level of performance for the business. The only way you do that is to classify the data. And yes, there are some, I'll call it starter solutions to do that. Maybe there's a Microsoft only solution, but as you mentioned, data is across the entire enterprise: SaaS, cloud, on-prem. On-prem just doesn't mean mailboxes, or excuse me, file systems. It means objects throughout the environment as well. It means PDFs. It in some cases means CAD files, things that historically have not been I'll call it put through the classification lens. We're now seeing organizations take a very focused approach on protecting their key data. We have a very large, kind of Fortune 100 semiconductor company leveraging our technology across the globe because of their concern for IP. I'll call it stealing, so to speak. In order to protect your IP, you need to know where it is by geography, by system, That includes OneDrive, SharePoint, Google, Ignite. There's so many different environments that your enterprise data classification has to be able to prosecute and then remediate it in an automated fashion. We're happy to be selected by them because of the breadth of our coverage and because of the depth of our ability, not just metadata, but as you mentioned, content level ingest and classification.
Absolutely, and you know, the reality is, I think there is a lot of work to do. There's a long way to go. But a question our viewers may have is, okay, how do I pick a data governance solution? And well, I just asked them simply, our respondents, 600 of them, so very much a representative sample of the market globally. What do you need in a data governance solution? What do you expect? So let's take a look at that. And it's very telling what we found. So in terms of, you know, look at the question at the bottom. Every time you can see the question and the number of respondents, so almost everybody responded here. So what are the most important features or capabilities that you're looking for in a data governance solution? So this is what I call the RFP slide, the fact that people will tell you what matters to them the most. And surprise, surprise, number one is improved data security. Which again, I think a few years ago, we would not necessarily have seen that. It would have been probably more focused on compliance. Improved intelligent data management capabilities comes in a very close second, almost at the same level here, if we look at it at 23% as well. And what's interesting here is the fact that intelligent data management is really sort of the objective. It's the operational objective of, or the objective of the actual solution, yet data security came on top. So I cannot repeat this more. Look, it's about cyber resiliency, and data management is of course important. Intelligent data management is critical, but you're going to have to consider both in the same breath here. Now, of course, the ability to better place data is number 3, but it's kind of behind in the lineup here, only number 3, and that's where you would talk about optimization of cost and storage, et cetera, and things like that. For me, this sort of RFP slide was a bit of a shock because I expected to see, you know, other data-related type of features come up on top, and really data security was the first one. What's your take on this, Mark?
Yeah, Christophe, it's absolutely 100% in alignment with what our clients and prospects are sharing with us. The budget to solve for, I'll call it improved cyber resiliency and the use of data classification to do that, it is coming from the CISO and the security team. 3 years ago, governance, risk, and compliance was a separate organization, often under legal, and quite frankly, very poorly funded to solve for an enterprise's needs. Today, the CIO and the CISO are mandating that classification occur. They're mandating that tagging occurs on certain documents to make sure that folks know who, what, and where that information resides. And that is coming and being implemented on a very, I'll call it steep curve from the security team agenda. So yeah, I would say 90+% of our engagements and our customers, the budgets to execute this are coming from the security teams.
Well, this is actually not necessarily a surprise because it's keeping them awake at night, right? And actually, let's take a look at that. I wanted to know what would people say in terms of their cybersecurity or cyber resiliency concerns for the next 12 to 18 months. So if we take a look at the research that we provided here, and actually let's bring up that chart. It's a very interesting one. As you can see, the top 2 is cloud security. Not a big surprise there. I would have bet money on that one. But AI-driven cyber attacks is very close number 2. And I think that's really what you were saying earlier, Mark. I mean, this is really about cyber. This is really very much so a combination now of data teams, compliance teams, IT ops, and security teams that have to work together. By the way, I'm calling out here in number 5, but at a very nice level, 33% in the popularity contest here. Compliance issues due to cyber incidents and attacks. I mean, this is something, by the way, in research, compliance has become more and more of a concern through the years. It is going up on the list. This is why you can now see investments and maybe confusion in terms of where to invest happening around data classification, compliance, cyber resilience, all of these markets starting to combine. So, you know, to me, the fact that what we see here, again, in the top 2 are cloud security and AI-driven cyber attacks, I think tells you everything you need to know about where the market's going and about what you need to think about as an IT professional.
Yeah, Christophe, if I could just say one thing, because this is really the kind of the perfect 2-for-1 scenario. So as we've talked about security being the driver of it, you actually get the 2-for-1 payback here. So many companies that exist in the financial services industry are regulated by rules like NYDFS. On the healthcare side, there's initiatives and regulations called high trust. Our customers are addressing their security requirements, and they're also getting their regulatory compliance attestations delivered at the same time, almost for free, right? So whereas in the past, folks used to, you know, kind of lead with, hey, I need to have the appropriate regulatory compliance system in place in case something is required. Now the security team saying, you know, that's a necessary good thing that happens once we solve our security requirements. So we're kind of able to help customers, you know, really kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
Thank you very much, Mark. Well, this was great, and yes, I like the idea that you can actually, you know, get multiple objectives achieved by being smart with your data, managing your data, making it more secure, allowing you to be compliant. More importantly, also preparing you for the next era, which is the era of AI. Let's not forget that, and that's another conversation we'll have in the future, I'm sure, but
Look forward to it.
data has to be ready for AI is absolutely critical, and none of that will happen if it's not cyber resilient and if it's not classified, if it's not well understood. Mark, thank you. We've covered a lot of ground. Thank you so much for, again, sponsoring this research and being part of our Cyber Resiliency Summit earlier in the year. And thank you very much for your insights into this great topic that is cyber resiliency and data governance. Mark, thank you.
Thanks, Christophe. Have a great one.
And to our viewers, thank you for your time. My name is Christophe Bertrand. I'm a principal analyst here at theCUBE Research. Thank you for your time.